Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ill Soy Advisor. We're second week into July, um, about halfway through the growing season. Would you say? Would you agree with that? So maybe our halfway assessments today give us your report cards on how the crop is doing. So let's just go ahead. Let's jump right in, and let's start with what's happening out in the fields. Drew, do you want to start first, and then we'll just go right down the state?
Sure can. So we're still looking at a kind of a broad base of stuff out there. I mean, the variability again in planting in the spring, timeframes, weather we had. I mean, we're seeing that with tasseling and pollination and flowering on soybeans. So it was in multiple cornfields yesterday. Guys are just kind of curious on disease levels, things like that, and kind of almost amazingly, I would say, is I still have seen very, very little to no disease development out there. I mean, fields are still very clean. Not sitting there saying to deter guys from planning on making a fungicide application or looking at that fungicide application, but as far as physically in our area, we're just not seeing that disease develop quite yet. Pollination is kind of moving right along. We are still seeing a lot of corn rootworm beetles, Japanese beetles out there. The fields that I was in weren't going to have enough silk clipping to be at an economic level. We could see a little bit, especially some of the earlier, some tassel you could tell that came out a little bit earlier, silks that came out a little bit earlier. You could tell there had been some feeding on them. They had been clipped off, but they were still turning into brown silk. They started to change color just a little bit. So they're going to be perfectly fine when you look at that. Beans, beans. Been a few days since I've been in any bean fields, but we were seeing them. They were very, very late R2, and looking at getting into that R3 fungicide application probably next week. Most of those are planted about April 20th or so. We are changing a few corn rootworm traps. We've had the first rotation of those move through, and actually had some traps come back with 30 beetles on them. So that's very, very high, if anybody's wondering. But we are still seeing kind of the effects of some of that feeding. Rain-wise, most of my territory, that Peoria type area, got a very, very nice rain out of that, moved up here from that hurricane. We'll kind of continue to see if there's anything that languishes from that. So just something kind of to keep in mind on that area of it is rust. There are a few other diseases that can move up with those storms, so we don't normally maybe deal with, especially in northern Illinois. But yeah, we'll be moving north of 80 tomorrow to start pulling some traps there and getting some rootworm counts to see kind of what we're looking at for overall populations.
I know Dr. Nick Sider was looking for volunteers to put out traps in fields. So if anyone's listening and if anyone's interested, you can get a hold of us over at Ill Soy Advisor. We'll connect you with him because I know he's looking to trap some insects in fields this summer. All right. Thanks, Drew. Eric, we'll head down to you near Champaign.
Yeah, so from Beryl, this past week kind of seems to be kind of the topic on everybody's mind with the amount of rain we received through the area. So we had some areas around the Danville, Vermilion County area that I'm seeing reports of 4.5, getting close to 5 inches of rain that we actually got out of the storm. And then as you kind of move down the state, it kind of west, it tapered off a little bit, but really ranged from about an inch all the way up to almost 5 inches of rain across the area. And then even last night, we had a lot of pop-ups kind of move through the area and kind of hang in some places. I know like currently where I live at, I only got 2/10, and then about 10, 15 miles away, they had over 2 inches last night near St. Joe. So it was really sporadic last night. But, as far as crop stages and everything go, a lot of our crop is quickly moving into VTR1. Pollination is moving forward, and I suspect with this heat and now with all the rain, a lot of stuff is going to be pollinating over the weekend and everything. Keep seeing issues with Japanese beetles and getting more reports of rootworm beetles. I'm a little bit behind Drew in as far as getting traps out, but we're getting traps deployed this week and should start being able to report some numbers next week. Finding some sporadic things out there. I found some corn leaf aphids and everything. So, kind of remind people that, as these different insect populations pop up, just remember that not the same insecticide will necessarily control, the same pest. So Just like weeds, we look to target, effective sites of action to control the weeds you've got in your field. Same thing as with the insecticides on corn or soybeans. Make sure we're choosing the right insecticide that's going to control the pest, because likely a Japanese beetle control is going to look a lot different than, say, a rootworm or an earworm control. So just kind of keep those things in mind. And two, as we have some of these big rain events like we had with Beryl, I think it would be good to monitor our soil fertility, because I'm starting to see some real deficiencies in corn, nitrogen deficiencies. There's even some places that suggest we may be close to 75 pounds short on some of this crop that, and I think part of it might be due to underdevelopment, but, I can actually account for it, some of it in the soil that, we've lost some of it when you look at, and it reflects the type of nitrogen programs that are out there. So those are always kind of good things to kind of check up on this year, as we go through the season and reflect back, the growing conditions and everything. So, and as far as diseases go, we're not really seeing anything widespread yet. I'm kind of sitting on the edge of the desk, pins and needles, waiting for this gray, I'm anticipating gray leaf spot. Maybe it starts showing up over past this weekend. Now we're finally getting humidity and we'll have the heat and everything. Tar spot seems like it's creeping closer, but still yet no confirmed. I have not heard any confirmed reports of tar spot in the area that I'm in. So.
Thanks, Eric. Heading down to Southern Illinois with Kelly, who you were expecting a lot of rainfall from Hurricane Beryl. And then I saw on Facebook, you got what, half an inch, 6/10?
Yes, 6/10. So, yeah, really disappointing. It was the worst flash flood I've ever seen. They talked about flash flooding for 3 days. And to be honest, as you got closer to St. Louis, some places 3 to 5 inches, but most of the area, I-70 South that I cover, a half inch to maybe an inch and a half locally in places. So not near the rainfall that they had been predicting. I got a couple of customers that have had, between what we got July 4th, I mean, we got about a half inch on July 4th, and we got another 6/7 out of Beryl. So we're not hurting for moisture, but we got some places that a 1 inch soaking rain would be nice here in another 6 to 10 days for sure. I mean, I think most of the replanting on soybeans is done. Most all the double crops are planted. There's still some emergence issues in some fields on beans, but I think the stands are going to be what they're going to be now. It's cocktail hour for the most part on spraying, and what I mean by that is that a lot of people are coming up with some cocktails trying to clean up some of these fields, and some of those cocktails are doing a pretty good job of killing the beans. So we've seen some stuff that looks like it's hit with a flamethrower. I don't know if it's going to come back or not. The weed issues, weed pressure, weed control, in some places with timing and everything, and just like these rains, I mean, there was guys, we got 6/10 on whatever day it was, Tuesday, and there was guys back in the field spraying yesterday, slinging mud just because they can't afford to let the weeds get any bigger at this point. So corn, all the early corn's been fungicided. I mean, still surprised at the number of people who have called questioning whether or not to apply a fungicide right now. We have a lot of gray leaf spot, a lot of northern, low in the canopy. I mean, it's just sitting there. With Beryl, the call started coming in about what we thought, southern rust would look like here. Tar spot's been confirmed in a couple of more counties. So, guys trying to decide, should they wait and spray when disease gets worse, or wait and, spray now? The corn generally looks good until you get up above it, and then you can see the holes. So I still think if we could continue to get rain, timely rains, we could be in position for a fairly good corn crop on the early corn. But a lot of it's going to depend on how many holes are in it and what the stand look like. Having said that, there's a lot of corn just being side dressed in a place or two. We're still ankle high, planted in late June. So we're just kind of all over the place.
Going back to fungicide, and this is a question for all three of you, do you see farmers pulling back on fungicide because of the commodity markets this year? I mean, record low prices. Are they willing to put more into this crop if they're not going to get a lot out of it?
Yeah, we've been having some of those conversations, some of those objections and everything. And and even we've had some of those objections, even guys that have prepaid for the stuff. I, I'm about to just wave my hands up and just throw up the white flag. I mean, I feel like growers, and if there's any growers and you want to have a conversation with me or call me out, go ahead. But I'm going to call BS on all the objections and everything with using fungicides. Year in and year out, we see fungicides work. We've seen it year after year in dry years. We've seen it in wet years. It's for different reasons in different years, but fungicides applications, they work. You wouldn't go to the field without applying nitrogen or using a seed treatment in soybeans. So why are we not using fungicides? I mean, it works. The yield data is there. And if you can't necessarily find it in the yield data, I would go encourage you to find it in your fuel savings. All modern combines track fuel usage very easily. Go look at that. Go time yourself in a field. See how long it takes you to harvest a field, and then think about that cost savings and labor savings you're saving. So I think there's a lot more aspects than just maybe the immediate disease or even the markets. I mean, if you look at when we first started spraying fungicides in the early 2000s with the headline amp, corn then was likely probably 350, the same markets. Fungicides paid then, and fungicides can pay now, return on investment. So I would really encourage growers to stay the course, because we get to harvest, and I hear a lot of times, I hear those same growers that are on the fence right now, and at harvest they say, well, I wish I would have spent the money on the fungicide because of all the down corn I'm going through, or the stalk rots and things like that I'm seeing at harvest. And farmers have got really short-term memory, and I hate to call farmers out and say that, but we need to really reflect back on years past. So I don't know, I guess that's my soapbox for the morning, and I might have created some hate there, but it needs to be said.
We kind of have a checklist on fungicide. So, I mean, number one, if it's white corn, it's going to get sprayed. Doesn't matter. Because of the disease packages that most of those white hybrids have, or don't have, I guess is the right way to say it. Anything late planted corn is going to get sprayed for sure, because of the amount of disease pressure that we'll have by the time that corn gets to R1, R2, somewhere in that neighborhood. So that will get sprayed. Anything that has to stand in the field prior, that's not going to get harvested early, that will get sprayed as well because of standability. Stuff planted in March, early April, a lot of times it's a scout and spray, and the reason for that is depending upon what the growing season is, the disease pressure we have or we don't have down here. So a lot of guys have been burned, and that's probably the wrong way to say it, but on the early corn by going ahead and spraying at VT, and then turning around in a situation like this and getting a hurricane or getting a tropical storm or something, and then getting southern rust and having to spray again. So, I mean, I'd say out of the last 4 or 5 years, we've probably had 2 years where some of the early corn has got sprayed twice. So, but the biggest problem with scout and spray is not scout and spray works. Okay. It works great. The timeliness of the application is the downfall there. So you cannot depend on the retailer, the airplane, the helicopter guy to get there once you scout and spray. So what we started tracking a few years ago was scout and spray, that sometimes when we identified the disease pressure that needed to be sprayed, it could be as much as 7 to 10 days before somebody showed up to spray it. And that was a no. I mean, that was causing big issues, yield loss, essentially. And so what we've actually seen this year, we're probably seeing more drones right now spraying fungicide on corn than we are airplanes, because it's timeliness. And so it's the airplanes come in from the south, so to speak. The helicopters come in, and they just make their progression north. And so, you know, they've already been here and left. And so if you've got corn that's just now needing to be sprayed, you know, it may be 2 weeks before they get back. Soybeans, different story. Have a real hard time recommending fungicide on soybeans. I think Carl Bradley's presentation down here at Rend Lake was, you know, the obvious reason. ROI maybe 50% of the time. We just don't see it on soybeans. Just don't see the yield response unless there is a disease pressure or you plant a susceptible variety. So that's my fungicide spiel.
Drew, before you chime in, I will say if anyone's interested in that presentation, it is on YouTube from our Rend Lake field day. So if you just search Illinois Soybean Association on YouTube, you can go and find it. All 3 presentations are on there. So, Drew, go ahead.
And really, I would echo a lot of what Eric said. I mean, he was very on point with a lot of those different factors there. The one thing I would say, kind of personally, I've had more conversations around maybe moving that VT-ish application that they were planning on making maybe a little bit early, because it looked like we were going to see an early disease onset. Maybe pushing that back to more of a brown silk application. That way they're thinking they're getting a little bit more coverage into the more of that kernel fill type of the growing season, because we're just not seeing the foliar disease development here quite yet, like Kelly is seeing where it is in the lower canopy. So I would say we've had more of that conversation than we would have guys pulling it completely. Or there's been a lot of conversation. I feel like growers are trying to be pickier on which exact product they're wanting to use, to maybe try to make sure that they're going to ensure a response that way by trying to pick a product that we see the highest return or we see the most consistent return on. So I would say it's more than like that in our area than it is guys completely pulling away. But we also have a lot of corn on corn throughout this district, and it's just those guys. It's just in their DNA now to make that application. So we're not at this point. We're really not trying to pull back on that.
I'll throw something else in there. I said cocktail hour on the soybean, spraying beans earlier, and I think that's the biggest question. I kind of left that out, is that fungicide on corn has turned into a moneymaker for a lot of people from the standpoint of all the extra crap they throw in there. You don't need a biological with your fungicide. You don't need a nutritional or a foliar feed or any of that other crap. You need fungicide. Leave that other crap out and save that money for something else. Save that money for the second application on a fungicide if you need it. I mean, just the fungicide. If I had the choice between spraying fungicide and not, I'd just spray the fungicide and forget about all the extra crap that everybody wants to dump in it.
And then I just wanted to add one more thing to the fungicide too, is that, if to maybe like to Drew's point, that if growers are considering one fungicide or another, I've kind of dug into that issue and looked at a lot of land grant university data and everything, and a lot of evidence suggests that when you truly look down at the statistics of the effectiveness of the fungicide applications, and you don't look at those maybe 1 or 2 bushel gains that a lot of the, I'm not going to throw any of the companies under the bus, but they all do it. And so when we really look at the statistics of fungicide application, especially on corn, as long as you're applying a branded, say a 3 mode of action. So you think about something that's got preventative and curative, and then also has got this new class of chemistry, the SDHIs, that is really bringing the residual component to our fungicide applications. And so as long as you're applying a reputable, say 3-way mix, there's not going to be any, difference. Now, if we're, maybe targeting a specific disease over another specific disease, that's where we can see some differences. But in general, if we're just going out there as a general plant health, broad spectrum disease control, all of our fungicides are going to work very well. So I just want to encourage growers that, maybe not necessarily don't get so worried or hung up if it's Deloro Complete, if it's Veltima, if it's Miravis Neo, Tribopro, they're all going to perform very well for you. And, I think the underlying message is that to stay the course with the fungicide applications.
Well, it's definitely a relevant subject to talk about this week. I was on a walk yesterday and airplanes were just shooting over my town applying fungicides. So it's definitely something that needs to be talked about. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. My final question for you is, the rain from Hurricane Beryl came through. People say it was record timing. According to the drought map last week, of course, one gets released this morning. Maybe it's already released. I should go look. Those areas that needed rain got it. So now people are talking about, we're going to have a record crop this year. And I'm curious what your thoughts are now moving forward. We're at the halfway point of this growing season. I guess my question to you is, there's still a lot of growing season left. I realize that, but what's your assessment of how this crop is going to look, I guess, come fall? Loaded question, I know.
I'll start on that. I don't mind a loaded question. We may have got rain. So let's take the two extremes. Where I'm sitting here, we got 6/10. That'll keep us going for 7 to 10 days. Where they got 3.5 inches, that'll keep them going for 7 to 10 days because most of it ran off. It came so fast. So from a rain standpoint or total accumulation of precipitation or whatever, the drought may be broken. But the other thing, I mean, so when we want to look at those kind of things, oh yeah, we got a rain, the drought's broken. That's great. Okay, yes, we got a rain, we've got moisture back in the soil. But again, back to Eric's point, our memories are short. We planted most of this crop in the mud, and it has no root system. So we can not be in a drought situation, and we're still going to be needing timely rains consistently from here until black layer on corn, especially soybean, same thing. So I I just think we're so far away from knowing what this crop really is going to be that it's not even funny. I think to even speculate that it's a record crop is just doing agriculture a disservice at this point.
I would say, certainly this rain puts a lot of, life back into the crop and everything that might have been stressed and struggling a little bit, especially to Kelly's point, I'm still seeing, even though, you're seeing the unevenness in tasseling and everything in the crop, and you're seeing, maybe even, unevenness in soybean crops. And we got to think that's still really due to, just like Kelly was talking about, we put stuff in the mud. And so we are going to still continue to need rains for a lot of these fields that have underdeveloped root systems. And, the other thing that I'm concerned about that we haven't talked about is this heat that's coming in next week. We look at these high daytime temperatures, and, I think there's going to be a little bit of break midweek, but we also got to think about, the stuff, especially in my area where we're starting to really pollinate well, that these high temperatures can actually fry the pollen that can affect pollination. And then also we need to also think about, with the fungicide applications with the plant health aspect, that's also going to help relieve some stress on these plants too. That and then if we start getting these nighttime temperatures where we're not getting, into the 70s at night and we're staying in 80s overnight, that really puts a lot of stress because corn plants do not shut down overnight. And I think Kelly maybe probably even said it earlier in another episode that, August rains make beans. We've still got a lot of time. I mean, the verdict is still, there's still a lot of time for soybeans to be made yet. And I can't even speculate on what soybeans will do yet. And corn, I think corn is just it took some stress off and is going to help pollination, but I'm concerned about some of this heat that may be coming in here in the future.
So a week ago, I was still digging plants that had hatchet roots with it. So they were still showing hatchet roots that had not grown out of sidewall compaction. So, and kind of to echo everybody else's points, I mean, yes, this rain helped and we needed it in areas, but in some cases, I think we actually saved ourselves from somewhat of a disaster more than we set up for a record crop. Now, you get north of 80, it's been beautiful up there all year. It's continuing to get rains. Those areas are probably set up and they were planted early, especially for that part of the state. Those areas, I would say, are set up for some very good, very high yields, and they're getting closer, especially on the corn of it maybe it being somewhat made. But on the you can move into that Peoria-ish area through there where we planted again in some muddy conditions, and we're still seeing a lot of stress from that. And again, on the soybean side, I would agree. I mean, we are far from made on those, and the herbicide applications I continue to see guys make as we get later into the reproductive stages, they're going to start taking more and more of a toll there as well. So,
yeah, I would challenge those people that say that we've got a record crop now. Come ride with me on Monday, and I'll show them pineapple fields.
Sounds good. Let's all go down to Southern Illinois. I would like it. I guess I traveled there just a couple weeks ago, and just even from driving, it's amazing the variability. But we know that because of planting season, like you said, like we can't get that lost in our minds. So we'll see what harvest brings. Like I said, still a lot of still a lot of growing season to happen for sure. So we'll keep tabs on that. Thanks all. Appreciate your contributions today. And of course, we'll be back next week with another podcast episode. Thanks all.